Right now we got a special guest with us. Emily Taylor is an attorney at the U.S. Law Shield. She joins us to talk about the NRA and their opposition to the renewal of the Violence Against Women Act. And Emily, just for background, if you could, in your words, could you explain to us what that act is, what the Violence Against Women Act calls for?
Sure. Well, it's broad. It does a lot of things, but specifically with regard to firearms, what the Violence Against Women Act does is essentially if you've been convicted of certain misdemeanor offenses, such as a misdemeanor crime of domestic violence and assault, misdemeanor crime of stalking, it's going to strip you of your gun rights under federal law permanently after that conviction. It's also going to take your gun rights away from you if you are under a protective order because one of those misdemeanor crimes is pending in the court system.
Okay, and so the opposition from the NRA is that red flag provision, right? The fact that it would take those gun rights away from you permanently.
Exactly. Essentially, where they're coming from, and there are gun rights groups who share this opinion, which is that a misdemeanor conviction should not take your constitutional rights away. And additionally, this issue of the fact that your rights go away for the pendency of the case, before you've been convicted, they are essentially arguing it's a violation of due process to take your gun rights away from you at that point as well.
Protective orders, though, help me out here on this. You may not have been convicted at this point of a crime, right, with a protective order, but doesn't there have to be something, some shred of evidence, some piece of information that would warrant a protective order?
Well, there should be ideally. The state should have to show up. They should have to prove that there is a risk that you're going to harass, threaten, or intimidate, and then the order should issue. Now, believe it or not, it actually gets misconstrued. That's not even the right word. It gets applied really broadly here in Texas because it's part of divorces here in Texas that most courts issue as a standard order, and that happens in every divorce case, that the parties should not harass, intimidate, or threaten people during the pendency of the divorce. And that qualifies under the Violence Against Women Act. So if you're getting a divorce and that order has been issued, which it probably has, you have lost all your gun rights under federal law for the pendency of the divorce, and you could be convicted of a federal crime if they find that you're in possession of firearms.
So any standard divorce in Texas, as that procedure is going through, you would not be allowed to carry your handgun?
Exactly. And most family lawyers don't actually even realize this is
that is news to me.
It is. And, I am, my focus is firearms in gun rights. And we try to educate family lawyers and educate people on this every single day because it is one of those things. It triggers the Violence Against Women Act in this way that I think is not intended by federal law and by the drafters of the bill, and yet it's one of those things. This is a reason why there are some gun rights groups who want to see that provision goes away or the law generally goes away.
Okay. Emily, I'll be honest with you, you're educating me as well today. That's news I didn't know. Jerry, did you know? I
had no idea.
I had no idea that any divorce in Texas that would apply. Emily, stick around because I'm going to play devil's advocate with you though on one piece of this Violence Against Women's Act. We'll get into that coming up. Emily Taylor joins us. She's an attorney at the U.S. Law Shield. The NRA is wanting to block the Violence Against Women Act, and you gave us some information, Emily, that we didn't know, that any standard divorce in Texas, essentially, while that procedure is underway, you're not allowed to carry your handgun. Let me ask you this, Emily. I'm going to play devil's advocate here, because one of the issues you were talking about is misdemeanor charges of domestic abuse or domestic assault. That if you have a misdemeanor charge, I want to make sure I get this right, that according to the Violence Against Women Act, you would lose your gun rights. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
So again, just like we were talking about with the divorce, if
Yeah.
there's a protective order entered, then you lose them, and then if you're convicted, you lose them.
Okay. I want to ask you about a case here that is that caught a lot of people's attention here in North Texas, and that involves a former bartender, Austin Sheffield. This is in Deep Ellum here in Dallas. Originally arrested for public intoxication, interference with an emergency call, and assault, all Class A misdemeanors. Now, video has come out, and we have seen this video evidence of him punching a female. And by the way, are you familiar with this story? Do you know the story?
I'm not.
Okay. It has since been upgraded. They're now filing aggravated assault charges with a deadly weapon and unlawful carrying of a weapon. The video shows him with the weapon in his hand at first. Then I want to make sure, I think he kind of holsters it, and then he hits the girl, and this is all on video. Originally charged with a misdemeanor. If that would have stuck, or if now he were to plead that felony charge of aggravated assault down, he would be allowed to get his gun again, right?
Sure. And, I don't know anything about that case.
Okay.
But if he had a dating relationship with that woman, then this qualifies under, the Violence Against Women Act.
If you watch this video, Emily, you would watch that video, I think, and Jerry, correct me if I'm wrong. This is my opinion coming in here.
Sure.
If you watch that video, Emily, you would say that guy does not need to have a gun.
It was brutal. It's a brutal attack.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to do. I wouldn't want to get hit like she did.
Yeah. And so I'm just trying to figure out how that would apply, like in this case, and like you said, Emily, you don't know this case specifically.
Sure.
Go ahead.
So anytime you get convicted of a felony offense, you're going to lose your gun right.
Right.
Now, keep in mind, part of the opposition against the Violence Against Women Act from some of these groups is that they believe not necessarily that it should not call for a loss of gun rights, but that the states, on a state-by-state basis, should make that decision. And here in Texas, we've actually already made that decision. So here in Texas, we have crimes of family violence. We, delineate them very clearly. We aggravate them very quickly. We accelerate the punishments very quickly. And so we also criminalize possessions of firearms in different ways. So it really is, I agree with you. There are some people that need to be flagged as violent, and there are some people who this law applies to unfairly. And perhaps the answer is we find a way to delineate those lines a little bit more clearly.
Yeah, we were talking about that. The piece about divorce and how it applies and how it relates to this Violence Against Women Act, that needs to change. That needs to be peeled out of this act somehow, Emily.
Well, and so that actually isn't within the act. Well, it is within the act itself, but that could be fixed more easily by judges in Texas being instructed that they cannot enter a standard order enjoining the parties from intimidation, threatening, or harassing one another unless there's evidence that it has happened in the past and
Right.
it's going to happen
But
again.
if it's a peaceful divorce, I mean, Jerry, you and I've got friends who've, they split everything with a legal pad over Chinese food at lunch.
It is a little different now.
Yeah, exactly. That doesn't need to apply to them. Emily, thanks for the insight. Thanks for the education. And thanks for joining us.